Alright, so now we're going to draw a simplified version of the pelvis. We'll start with the straight on view. So let's just go for an oval, a slant to each side, an oval, and a line connecting. So basically the way I've seen and heard it referred to as is floating underwear. And then you can draw a cross section. And so the other thing that I like to pay attention to here is that there's a difference from the male to female, even in the simplified version. So when I go to draw a female character, I draw the leg attachment at more of a slant. Less divide and separation from the legs, and the overall height of the pelvis area a bit taller. Something like that. Now again, this is a simplified approach, and there are lots of ways you could really look at this and do this. You can experiment with whatever shapes and forms you feel are adequate for this part of your illustration, and you're probably going to have a little bit of tendency to draw what you've drawn before, right? So don't think that you have to adopt exactly my way of doing it. More so, I'm trying to show you that by staging your work in these ways, you can really aid yourself in the process of drawing more complex figures from different angles. But again, just little tips like this to hopefully help you with this. That, you know, look for the slant there. Typically the hips are wider. Now we're going to get into, you know, landmarks of the body and things like that, bony structures, bony landmarks. But one of the things to think about is, you know, the leg bones, they come out like this and come inward. So as we do more revised versions of the body, you do think about this, because that's why the legs typically bow out right here and come down. But again, you don't have to, you know, get into this too much now. I just want you to be aware of that we are kind of foregoing that with our simplified primitive forms of the three main masses, and we're really going to draw you know, arms and legs with cylinders as well. But yeah, you kind of start here and then elaborate further. So we'll move on to that shortly. But so now what you want to do is really just practice drawing this from different angles. If you have a hard time drawing these by themselves, so for instance, you try to draw this angle, for instance, and maybe you struggle with, you know, placement of the curvature of the side that's away from camera, or away from our view, I should say. That's fine. I mean, it's a tricky set of shapes. In fact, I'll see some people that will actually draw them a bit more like this. So having this opening for, you know, this area here is a little bit easier to discern. It's kind of like a bean-like shape, right? And to kind of see and figure at an angle. And you know, we're not really going to see the opening to the leg as much as we're going to see a downward, the downward effect that it has on the perimeter side. So, you know, you can picture there's an oval here, but you wouldn't draw the opening there, right? You wouldn't draw an oval like this, because we're looking down at that, right? If anything, it would be, you know, the oval would be on the other side like that, but hidden. So I would say just draw, you know, more of a perimeter shape for this area. But again, you could draw the opening to the waist area with a bit more curvature, and you might find that to be helpful in explaining the, you know, this form in a certain angle. So let's clean that up a little bit more. And I'll go back and clean up a lot of these illustrations for you, so that you have these to study with and draw as many times as you need to till you feel comfortable with them. But again, you're welcome to experiment and draw your own versions as well. So something like that. Now what you could probably do here, let me scale this up a little bit more, You could probably even say, well, you know, what if you saw a little bit of the opening of the oval over here? All right, so drawing through your artwork is always helpful, and yeah, you might see that. You might see a little bit more of the opening right there, and maybe that helps you to envision it. So you can definitely try that. Would you see maybe a little bit of it over here? Something like that. But again, just practice that. See what you come up with. And so let's try, obviously, one from the back. So typically it would look about the same, but then we would show, you know, a bit of the glutes in there. So we get the curve going up like this. There's a little bit of a like a V-like shape back here. We'll get into that more with the anatomy, but again, just something simplified to get the idea going. And just like that, there's another one. Okay, let's try a little bit more of a perspective view. So we'll lay in our basic prism to give us some sense of perspective. Probably bring this over more. Okay, we'll show the opening. So just remember that you have basically a real shorthand method of this is disc, disc, or oval, oval, connect. All right, see how quick that is? So that's the really simplified, quick version of it. So if you can draw 3 ovals and a connecting point, you should get there. Now the trick is here, though, one oval is going to be very, you know, very tight to our view. I don't know, the angle is going to be tricky. This one would probably be over here more, like this. You almost have to think of these in parallel to one another, but with different slants or angles. And then we connect them. But yeah, it's still a bit tricky, and I don't know that we would see this as we'd see this as a downward angle, right? We're not going to see the inside of this opening of the oval. We're not going to see the inside of either one of them, but we still need to kind of pinpoint areas. So we got our center line here. Let me soft erase this so it reads a bit better. Push that all back. Something like that. Something like that. Because again, we're not looking for a final render here. We're looking for basically a tool, a method. So I would probably take it to about right there and call it good. And yeah, of course I could get in here and say, well, you'd see the opening of the leg like this, and you wouldn't see it here because it's a downward angle. And you could get in here and show more bend like this, probably make it look like it reads a bit better. Let's try that. So again, you can elaborate, but it's kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. We're not trying to elaborate and make the perfect pelvis-like shape here. What we're doing is trying to devise ways to turn these objects in our imagination and on the page so that when we go to do our next stage and our other stages on top of it, we have a better segue. I like to think of it almost like a relay race. We're handing off the baton to the next version of our work, and therefore making it a lot easier for us to process all this stuff, because again, it's complex by itself. So again, practice these at different angles. You know, again, take reference pictures, look at pictures of people in action, gymnastics, people running, and just, you know, take bits and pieces of those different angles and, you know, redraw them in this primitive way, so that you can really start to grasp it. And then from there, as we start to combine the three main masses, which we'll move on to now, we're going to see and experiment with the twisting and contorting of the body and the relationships that they have as the body's moving. Very important. So with that, let's move on to our next lesson.